Hey everybody, welcome to our webinar. Thanks for joining us. I'm gonna get Matt to kick it off here.
Yep, I'm just gonna get this going here. So welcome everybody. We're here in beautiful, sunny Vancouver, British Columbia. It's gorgeous out here in the Plantiga office, and we're excited to be back on our webinar after a bit of a hiatus through COVID to share some of the things that we've been working hard on in the past couple of years to improve the platform. I'm really excited to be joined here by Lauren and Megan, and together we've been pushing forward with the rest of the team here in the past two years or so, upgrading hardware, upgrading the website, and we're going to share some of the exciting developments today in terms of what we've been up to. But first of all, just for those of you who are new to the system, I want to tell you a bit about Plantiga. I started with Plantiga going on about 8 years ago when Quinn Sandler, the founder, reached out to me and asked me, hey, would you be interested in measuring asymmetries in the real world? And the answer to that was an immediate yes. And at the start, I would say that it was a smart insole instrumented with an IMU. But as time has gone on, I really truly believe that the insole is impressive, but it's the least impressive thing about the company, because the company has really transpired into a movement health platform that's providing all sorts of practitioners with a technology that allows you to measure out in the real world and to do things that previously was only possible, in a lab setting or with very expensive set of force plates. Now we can do this in a much easier way, and bringing this to the whole world, so that sort of democratizing the idea of biomechanics. If you think about the current state of affairs in the wearable space, you've got a wearable that measures your heart rates, you've got a wearable that measures your steps, you've got a wearable that tracks your blood glucose. But it's kind of funny that you think about the most common thing that we all do, which is move around the world wearing a pair of shoes, and it's always baffled me that there's really no technology that can measure our movement out in the real world. And that's where Plantiga comes in, with the goal of empowering people to move better so that they can live better and longer lives. That means whether you're an elite athlete who suffered an ACL injury and you're trying to come back to sport. I'm thinking about NFL football here. So many players right now going down with ACL injuries. We've got clients that have neurological disorders and diseases that have been extremely benefited by the technology, allowing them to look at their movement quality and movement health. And just, for the average person, you're running, you're trying to live a better life. And that's where we come in, is to provide as we say, the next vital sign, which is measuring how you move, which is fundamental to all the other things that a lot of wearable techs provide in terms of a knowledge base. So with that goal in mind, the past couple of years have been a ton of development, because we realized a couple of years ago that we needed to take a deep dive into the end user, and specifically the actual individual who was using the platform, to understand how they were interacting with the platform, to understand the sorts of tests and measures that they would need. And so we really, really dug deeply into trying to improve that end of the platform. But now we are back in and have done a ton of work to be able to provide a system now that can help practitioners, so clinicians, practitioners, physicians, chiropractors, strength and conditioning coaches, personal trainers, to provide a whole range of tests and reports that we'll talk about today, but with a specific focus on the idea of musculoskeletal rehab, neurological conditions, and then a third bucket, which is around research, providing a tool that anybody who's researching in this area, you can get this product and actually get the raw data and do everything you might need to do from a research standpoint to measure, your participants in the real world in whatever setting you might be in. So the feedback was always along the lines of what you'd expect. Number one, the hardware, could we make it smaller? Number two, yeah, it's great. We see the hardware, it's awesome, but the web platform was a little bit clunky to use and maybe not as intuitive, and it needed to be simplified. But I think most importantly, the third bullet is, well, how do I literally bring this technology into my day-to-day and potentially even monetize it, and to create value for my clients? And that's that third bucket that we're really excited to show you here today about our reports, which is literally from the time you run a test to the time you upload the data, you get an immersive report that you can print, you can give it to your clients, you can email it off to your network. And as you'll see, it's a really, really exciting development. And finally, And this is what I'm most excited about is it's like, so what do I do with the data? And so I've been working really closely with Megan and Lauren, and we've been building out our pathway for educational content that's going to allow users to understand how to take the data and then actually act on it to be able to make interventions. So at this point, I'm going to move into our next phase of the talk to sort of give you some highlights of what's been happening. And I'm going to throw it over to Lauren, who's going to talk about hardware. So Lauren, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So our hardware currently, we are in generation 4. On the screen, you can see what most of you currently have. We've got the pods and the dock. And we know that it's been a little bit clunky. There have been some issues, like for example, the pods have only 5 hours of battery life, and sometimes you have to wiggle them on the dock, and there are certain things that we know could be made a little bit better. So in the name of continual progress, we are doing a complete overhaul of our hardware in Q1 of the next year. And so I'm just going to introduce some of the improvements that we're making because we're pretty excited about it. So this is generation 5 on the screen there. You can see it definitely looks a little bit slicker than the previous generation. And I'm going to kind of walk through each of the different components, but just so you guys know, it's actually real. I have it here. This is our base station. We've got our pods. We're going to be going through some internal testing here, and we're super excited to show you guys all of the sweet things that are coming down the pipeline here. So firstly, the new pod. We have taken your feedback into consideration, and we've now got a 40% reduction in size from the original pod to the new pod, and that's going to be super critical for comfort and general form factor. So that's really exciting. You can see the dimensions on the screen there. Our generation 4 pod is 42 by 47, and the new pod is going to be 28 by 35. So that's pretty exciting, getting all of the same stuff into a smaller, better package. We've also got a different battery, which is going to enable about 8 hours of recording time as opposed to our current 5. And it's also going to enable more standby time and more predictable battery status. So hopefully days of standby time. We're going through our testing at the moment to figure out exactly what those numbers will be, but it's going to be a pretty big improvement, and we're definitely excited about the improvements there. We also have what we call a base station. So currently, all of our users have what we call a dock, which is where you would put the pods on and you plug it directly into your computer, or that dock gets plugged into a base station, which then gets plugged into the wall. Now we've got one unit that combines both of those into a much slicker, nicer, easier to use system. It's also got a much more reliable pod connection. So the pods just slip right in there instead of the magnets and having to wiggle them around on top. They just, I don't know if you guys can see, but they just slip right in there. They're like held in position a lot more securely, and it's just going to be a lot more reliable. And it just looks pretty cool. I got to say, I'm super impressed with our hardware team. It's been a long design process, and it looks really cool. It's like very comfortable to have. Yeah, we've all been playing with it for a long time. And then the third component here is actually the carry case. So previously we had that little clip that went over the pods, and it just held them together so that they would stay in sleep mode. Didn't work the best when you just toss them in your backpack. Sometimes they would slip apart and the pods would come out of sleep mode, and it would take up some of the battery time. But now we've got this like AirPod style case, which again, just like the base station, the pod just slips right in, gets held in securely. And it's really nice and convenient to just put it in the case and throw it in your bag. It also opens up some future possibilities, which we can play with a little bit. Maybe down the line, we can have this carry case be like a portable charger. We can just put a lot more stuff into this, and it opens up the door for us for a lot of cool stuff. And again, it's just pretty cool. So that's an overview of our hardware updates. The next thing is moving into the user interface and how you actually interact with the data on the web app. So I'm just going to walk you guys through some of those things here. On the screen, you can see one of our old summary cards. So a main piece of feedback that we got was, this is all very cool. Look at all these cool numbers, but what do I focus on, right? Like we've got 9 metrics on there for walking, which are all really valuable, but not the most valuable for every population. So we've turned it around and we've chosen some specific metrics that we think are most important for walking. All of the metrics are still there for you to explore, but we just have created this new daily card, which is a little bit more pointed, a little bit more specific and easy to view. So we've highlighted 3 metrics for walking, and we've got a load asymmetry visualization at the bottom there. Each of the activities has their own summary card with the relevant metrics. And in the bottom, the buttons have also changed. So the first button there is now reports. The second button is trends, so you can see the longitudinal data. And then we have explore if you do want to take that deep dive into the data, because that's super important as well. So that's our first UI update. The next one is creating intra-activity splits. So just as an example, this is an activity where there were intervals done. So the average metrics would happen over the whole activity, but what if I want to look at only the first one? Well, now you can do that. You just zoom in on that section and there's a create activity button, and it just creates one separate activity from that split, creates the metrics on that one activity, and allows you to just be a little bit more pointed with your analysis. So that's a cool one that we've very recently implemented. And lastly, we have some more interactive trends. So looking at data over time, if we look at this one screenshot of a cadence graph, you can see that there was improvement, but now using the controls box on the right side of the screen, you can overlay some of the relevant metrics, like for example, an actually plotted trend line with the slope, if that's what you're interested in. You can also show the min, the max, and the mean, and it just makes it a little bit easier to look at, to quantify the trends that you're seeing, and makes it more interactive. So that's a brief overview of our updates. We're going to actually go through some of the site live after we go through the reports. So look out for those new changes. And I'm going to pass it back over to Matt to go through our new reports.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. So yeah, very exciting to see all the developments on our platform. I know for me personally that as a practitioner working in the high performance athlete space, the biggest thing I would do would be to run testing. And then I would need to take that data and I'd need to convert it into something that I could then communicate out to a coach, an athlete, a surgeon, a physio, and I need to be able to communicate that in an immersive way and in a simple way to be able to sort of contextualize what do we do next. And that comes down to having an immersive report. And that's something that on the Plantiga platform previously, we weren't really able to provide. There was a lot of data that was reported. You could go and see trends, but to get a nice hard copy, formal looking document that you could circulate, and to have other features involved where you could email it, you could write some notes, it just really wasn't possible. And so that's one of the big things that we've been changing here in the past couple of years. And really what we're trying to achieve with this is, being able to help contextualize or provide an answer to the question, is what's going on with my data? Is it good or bad? I just want to make one quick mention as well that a big thing that we've been doing is partnering with some third parties, universities primarily, to validate our equipment. And that's really crucial. I mean, validation is something that Plantiga has always put as a priority. That was early on set as a core value, is that we were going to be continually trying to provide the best quality data that we could. And so we know that's an iterative process. Plantiga bought their own force plates, they have a treadmill, but the reality is that you want to be able to take this data and you want to be able to collect it in a gold standard way. So one partner of ours, Dr. Chris Napier at University of British Columbia, has a full gate lab. And we've been working very closely with him and his research team to be able to make validation. Can provide an answer to the question, what is good and bad. And I thought I would share my data. So this is actually now a run report that this is how it's going to look when you go onto our website. By the way, it is going to be live at the end of the webinar. You'll be able to actually go and start accessing all these features. Just make sure you hard refresh your webpage so that it actually reloads and it's not a cached version of it. But this is actually what you'll see. And you'll notice at the top, it's this is a PDF that as an individual, I can actually look at it on the website and use it myself, right? And actually see what's going on. But if I was a practitioner working with another person, I could take this, print it, send it. And this is now quite intuitive. The other thing that we have a whole suite of metrics that we can provide. But in the past couple of years, Lauren, Megan, and myself, along with a couple of really close friends and colleagues, that Mike and Ryan and a couple other individuals some of whom might be even on this call today, we actually took this was what I was most excited about starting with Plantiga, was a chance to use a brand new technology to really understand movement. And so every Friday, we would actually be doing interpretation of data on all sorts of clients, athletes, people with neurodegenerative disorders. We would be sitting down looking at the data as a team so that we could really start to understand what the metrics meant in the context of rehab, performance, recovery from injury, and all those sorts of things. So now, on our reports, you're getting a distillation of all of our knowledge in the past couple of years down into this report. So it's kind of like what we would deem as the most crucial pieces of information that we've been using in the past couple of years to make differences in the lives and in the careers of individuals who are using our platform. So just a quick mention for my issues: left Achilles tendinopathy. I've been battling it for a while, and it's just interesting to note that when you examine my takeoff vertical acceleration asymmetry. So this is the acceleration right at the point of toe off, which is one really unique thing that Plantiga can detect when your foot is on and off the ground. By the way, preliminary validation data compared to gold standard is looking extremely promising in terms of how our data lines up with the true sort of true north readings. But you can see here my asymmetry, 17% asymmetry, right side, higher acceleration, which is indicative of that left side Achilles tendinopathy. So, I've got my performance data at the top. I've got my current data, my past previous run data. You'll notice as you scroll down, it's giving me the asymmetry interpretation, which is based off of normative data. So we've collected data on more than 150 healthy humans. And we've actually been able to establish now what the typical patterns are for asymmetries for the stuff that we measure. So when you see this, those green, yellow, and red bands actually pertain to real data on humans collected with the Plantiga system. So now you know what is good and what is bad, obviously with all that now being displayed in this way. And then the last little piece at the bottom that I know Lauren will touch on a little bit more is this idea of strategy. So it's coming back to this idea of, okay, I know my right side is more dominant than my left, but we also want to understand movement strategy and movement quality. And so these are some other metrics that we're providing. You'll notice that in my bottom there, it's the gray band is showing the run strategy, indicating that I'm a bit more of a terrestrial runner, which would mean that you can think about an aerial runner where I'm sort of bouncing along as I run. This would be the idea of sort of spending more time on the ground. Neither good nor bad, but those strategy variables are actually pretty crucial for practitioners in interpreting what to do next with their clientele. So some more data from me. You'll notice my load asymmetry bottom right panel. That's you can sort of see if you scroll to the right side of the graph. That's where my Achilles tendinopathy starts becoming a major issue, and you can see me sort of trending back to happy place again as I recover and strengthen my Achilles and strengthen my ankle. But really, I guess in addition to sort of what you find for your own personal use, we've got context now. Got the capacity to share this and obviously improving this idea of knowledge translation, which is so crucial to turn this into something valuable that people can actually use. Like you can integrate this now into your clinical practice or your performance training center, and you can have these reports and be able to give that value back to your clients in a very, very easy and straightforward way. So I'm going to throw it over to Lauren now. She's going to just exit out of our presentation here. And she's going to show a kind of a walkthrough of what this new web-based platform actually looks like. Really cleaned it up astronomically from where we were in terms of its slick factor. So Lauren, I'll throw it over to you to give us some highlights.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we're going to go through some of my data because I recently did a full baseline on myself because I'm doing some training and I'm using that to inform my training program. So this is our actual site. This is what it looks like right now. If you go on to plantiga.io, you can see it for yourself. So we can see our new lovely summary cards that I walked through a few minutes ago. But I'm going to go through the actual reports. So we have individual activity reports. So using this report button in the bottom left corner of the summary card, you can go to an individual activity report, or we actually now have full baseline reports. So I'm actually going to hit this button up here, and it's going to automatically load this report. These are automatically generated for every activity that you do, so you don't have to play with the data yourself. You just do the activity, upload it, and you can share it however you like. And you can see there's a download button up here, as well as a share report button, which are going to be really critical for actually translating that info to your athlete or client or patient or whoever it happens to be. So just on this cover page, one thing to note, this section down here will actually change to be your team name. So if you are the Vancouver Clinic for Awesome People, that's what it's going to show in that bottom left corner. So it's a little bit personalized for you. So I did a full baseline, which included a walk, run, and all of our jump tests. And so this baseline report basically goes through and shows you all of that data in one report, which will just be so much easier than having to print out as many of the different reports as you would need to do. So we've got our walk test here. Similar to what Matt just showed for the run, we have the performance table and the relevant asymmetries, and then we have a balance section here, which is what we chose as the relevant parameters for walking. So we've got double support, which is the percentage of your gait that you have both feet on the ground, which is really reflective of like confidence and balance and just general, like how well you're able to support yourself. Because if you feel like you're going to fall, for example, you'll try to spend more time on both feet as opposed to one foot at a time. And so as you age, or if you have a neurological condition or something, you will generally have higher double support. And that's a really good indication for your gait, I guess, health and movement health in general.
Can I just make a quick comment to you, Lauren?
Please,
just
yeah.
to say that, you can think about some applications here. So if you're in a healthcare application, or let's say you're in a setting of a care setting, right? You could imagine a scenario where you're bringing in your clientele, running this test, and being able to almost make a prediction about who in your care facility might need a walker, extra support, how are things changing, effectively allowing you to intervene before you make, obviously the worst case scenario, someone falls, hurts themselves, and now they're in that vicious cycle of having to get a surgery in a hospital. It's a really critical piece of health information. And the other place that I think this is so valuable, and I just want to touch on this, is that go back to the context of ACL injuries in NFL, right? At some point, that NFL football player is going to have to learn to walk normally again. And I can tell you from working with athletes who've had ACL injury, that's not a guarantee. I mean, people walk with limps, they walk with all sorts of movement distortions that may persist. It's a really simple, straightforward test. You can run it nearly anywhere, and it has a lot of relevance, not just for people who just walk, but it has contextual relevance in the area of rehab in a pretty big way.
Yeah, absolutely. Please jump in, both of you, whenever you have context and things to add here. So we've already seen a run report. I'll just touch a little bit on the run strategy. We also have some jump strategy metrics as well, but I kind of want to explain what that means. So we have aerial and terrestrial strategies here. So like Matt said, he's a bit more of a terrestrial runner, which means that he uses more of a muscular strategy to push himself forward over the ground, and there's less vertical oscillation, whereas an aerial runner will essentially use the elastic potential in their muscles and tendons to push themselves up as they go forward and use less muscle force. So it's not like either of those options is better. It's just what is your run strategy and how are you maximizing what your body's made for. And so it just kind of puts you on a spectrum. You can see I'm a very mixed strategy runner, and that's totally okay too. But it's just kind of interesting to know and be able to quantify how you run and if that's changing based on an injury, or if you are detrained and you've become less springy, then you might see yourself becoming more of a terrestrial runner, and just seeing how that changes over time. So if we go down to some of our jump metrics, again, you can see the performance metrics up here, and you can also see the asymmetries. There's a different jump strategy here. So this would be a bounce versus a push strategy. The bounce, again, would be using more of that elastic potential energy, versus push would be using more muscle energy. And just seeing what's your strength, because everybody kind of has a different strength. I tend to be a little bit more pushy in the consecutive counter movement jumps, but I'm a little bit more springy in the cyclic jumps. Megan tends to be more pushy for both jumps. It just depends on you.
Just a quick comment there too, Lauren, that I thought I'd add is that, when we start talking about, again, the context of MSK rehab, and specifically around ACL injury, there's been some recent studies that have come out and question the notion that our classic asymmetry testing is, effective, sensitive, predictive of, how people fare after an ACL reconstruction surgery. And I think one of the emerging thoughts around how we rehabilitate athletes after these types of injuries is improving their plyometric ability. So I always use the analogy, it's like driving around a corner in a squishy Cadillac versus your Audi S4. And athletes who tend to fare worse are a little bit more like a squishy Cadillac. Athletes who fare well tend to be a bit more like an Audi S4. But previously, you'd run a jump test, you'd look at a metric like RSI or something else, and people would look and say, well, what does that mean? Is it good? Is it bad? Where should I be? Again, I just want to reemphasize that even take a look at the asymmetries. You'll notice that the green bands are different depending upon whether we're talking about landing or takeoff. Well, because this is now based on our data set and normative data. And then back to the idea of jump strategy, this is a crucial piece, right? You might have an athlete who previously has more of a bounce strategy, i.e. either more plyometric, they get injured, they move towards a push strategy. And now you're trying to retrain that plyometric capacity to get them back for the sport that they might be in. So it becomes a really nice way to visualize that. And what's great is that you can contextualize this now to the end user, which means that as the end user, I understand what push and bounce mean versus I have an RSI of 1.12 versus 0.3, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. So this is the cyclic jump, looks very similar. You can see, like I said, I've got more of a bounce strategy in this one. Also, very large landing vertical acceleration asymmetry. I should probably take a look at that. Yeah. Okay, good to know. Look at that. The reports are even teaching me things. When we come to the single leg jumps for both height and distance, we now have some new data visualizations, which are pretty cool. So you can see the muscle function graph is showing you what muscle groups that particular test is targeting. So for single leg jumps for height, we're targeting the quads a little bit more, whereas the single leg jumps for distance are targeting the glutes and hamstrings a little bit more. And just based on those population norms for the performance metrics, you get a better sense of how you perform based off of our norms, which again, like Matt has mentioned, the what do I do now is pretty important for that. So if you're coming off an ACL injury and one side is way below the average and one side is way above the average, then you might want to be working on bringing the lower side up towards the healthier side and just bringing that asymmetry up, but also bringing both sides up, because like we've said in our webinars previously, being symmetrically weak is worse than being asymmetrically strong. So the end goal is to have both sides in the green as opposed to just both sides looking the same. So just a couple of other notes on our new reports, which are pretty exciting. I'm going to go to an individual activity report just because it's a little bit easier to see. So let's just take this walk test. By the way, this is how you get to the individual activity reports. You go to the card for that activity and hit the first button in the bottom left. And there are just some other cool things here. So for example, adding notes is a new feature we've added. At the bottom of the page, there's a little pencil button here. And using Markdown, which is sort of a techie way to say you type and things show up, you can add whatever notes you want to see. For example, hey, good job this week. On the left is where you type it. On the right, you can see a preview of it. So if you wanted to add things like headers, oops. I think my Markdown is not very good. Okay, so maybe just type it. We'll work on that. But once you're done adding your notes, you just click the save button and they show up here. So if you're a practitioner in the clinic and you see that, for example, I had a leg swing time asymmetry in the yellow zone, and that's something that I want to draw attention to, you can come down and add a note in here so that your patient knows about it. And they can, put this on their fridge and say, hey, this is what I'm working on this week. And the next time they come back, you can, readdress it and make sure that it's still in their mind. So the notes are pretty critical and pretty useful for that. One thing to note is that you will have to download this PDF to have the notes stay where they are. If you just navigate away from the page, they will disappear. So just be aware of that. But to do that, you just click the download and it gets saved as a PDF, which then you can print, you can attach to an email, you can do whatever you want. if you wanted to directly email it, you just hit share this report and you put whatever email you want to go to. As we're going to Rowan today, my practitioner Rowan, and the name of the report, which is editable. And then you just hit send and it goes directly to that person. So if you are a physiotherapist working with someone who had an ACL tear and you want to share this data with their surgeon, for example, you just toss their email address in there and send it off to them, and they will have the information and they'll be able to kind of cater what they're doing to the data, which is pretty cool. So that is our new reports features. Did I miss anything on the report?
I think that's
Trends. Oh, trends.
Can't forget about trends.
Right, thank you. There's so much stuff. It's hard to keep track. If we scroll down to this third page here, this is pretty cool. You can see their trends, but this is actually interactive. I know it looks like a static image, but if you click and drag, it's going to zoom in, which is awesome. And it works exactly like the current trends page in that respect. So if you've got somebody's whole all-time data, but you only want to focus on the most recent rehab section, for example, then you just click and drag and zoom in, and that's what shows up on their graphs. I think that's it. Yeah, did I cover it all?
Yeah, I think you got it all. I mean,
Okay.
and I just, as you're, I guess we're heading back to the slide deck, but as we go back to just sort of the original goal and why we put all this energy in, is that, saying this all along, the whole point about this is changing behavior and hopefully leading somebody down the path towards better movement health. And so we see that was probably our biggest take home message over the past couple of years, interacting with all of our individual members, is the value they got when we were able to sit down with them and share what we were seeing in the data, and then most importantly, tell them what to do next. And so understanding that is such a crucial part of this puzzle, now we've basically opened up this opportunity for all of you, right? Clinicians and practitioners and sports scientists and strength coaches and personal trainers, that you can actually now pull all this together into your workflows and be able to hopefully interact in a much more effective way with your with people that you're working with.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah.
Okay, we are gonna move on to our next exciting thing, which is educational content. So our lovely resident genius Megan is gonna go through that.
Yeah, this is kind of like the icing on the cake, really, with like Plantiga's growth and evolution. Even since like I've joined, it's like this technology that has all this power, the analysis and the data that has all this power. Now the reporting to be able to visualize it and analyze it and really get into some nitty-gritty details, or however you want to. And then it's like, what do I do with the data? Maybe there's a gap in my current knowledge base that I'm really interested in learning about a little bit more to enhance kind of like how I'm translating these measures to my patients or my clients. And the other thing is like, the technology and some of these measures, it's like no one's been able to measure this like Plantiga has before. So we want to make sure that we're giving the information to the users, and so that they can really also get that deeper detail on how to be looking at movement health. And for me, with my background is being a researcher for so many years, that like there was a lot of great ideas in technology, and it's like once you actually implemented it, those kind of like things started rearing their ugly heads. Like, okay, maybe this isn't as practical. It doesn't work out as well. For me, and like I really have seen the value with Plantiga, and I believe in it so much. And so I'm really excited about taking the educational content to the next level. How do I?
The button looks like an arrow.
That's not doing it.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, didn't want to work. So launching by the end of today, we're going to have our first online course. It's called Quantitative Gait Assessment for Monitoring for Practitioners. And really, it's going through the key metrics on how we can use gait to understand our movement vitals, our movement health, and also looking at how we can translate clinical presentations of gait into quantitative ones. Because we think about, if you're a practitioner, you're a physio at a clinic, you can only see so many people in a day. Your time is your limiting factor. You have a ceiling above you. But if you're able to, monitor multiple patients at a time, or maybe you can be monitoring them at home with their remote monitoring, or maybe it's about how else can you differentiate and again, like elevate that ceiling of what you can do in your offering and bring more people in is really key to a successful business. So there's the education point of it, but then it's also giving the resources in the hands of the people who need it most. So if you're interested in that, we'll be posting a link on that on our website later today. Yeah, the button's not working. But that's not just it. There will be a lot more to come. So this is more, the first one is going to be more so of like a general overview of gait assessment and monitoring, looking at the gait cycle. But then after that, we really want to take it and go the extra mile and looking at whether it is special populations, whether it's specific tasks, and the exciting thing for that is that discovering with you guys of all the things that we can actually do with like the power of quantitative objective data. So stay tuned for that as well. And also if you guys are interested in actually seeing this in implementation, our next webinar, we will actually be diving into how you can be using this in these kind of specific contexts in your practice as well.
Same time next Friday.
Yeah. But that's not it. Also upcoming is members area. So we're wanting to put everything in one central hub, nice and convenient, but also showing you all the resources that we have to offer, whether it is, our video library, if you want to watch this webinar later on, but also some mini tidbit educational videos or maybe some demonstration videos. You can access it in one spot. So this will be all member exclusive. No one else will get access to it other than you guys. If you want to be looking at reports, if you want to be accessing the educational content, if you want to order some new replacement insoles, then it's going to be conveniently there for you as well. Video library, you can see that making sure that we have all of our resources in one central spot so it's easy to access. And then this one we are very excited about is the onboarding curriculum. So like I think about in a research setting again, where I was a grad student, every lab I went to, there was a new technology. And it was kind of like, here you go, figure it out. You look at all these like manuals, sifting through pages, because we're all stretched for time and resources. And so for this, it's actually being able to show you how to set up your system, how to do that confidently, know that you're doing it successfully, how to collect the activities, and then also diving into how we can look and analyze the metrics, similar to how Lauren was demoing for us as well. And it's there. So if you're like, well, maybe I need to go over that again, you can go back to it at every time. You don't have to remember it. So really, it's like I said, it's like the icing on the cake, and we're gonna keep pumping it out. If you guys like it and you keep wanting it, we will keep making it for you.
So that's it for the new stuff for the moment. We've always got new stuff, but we wanted to show you guys in a one comprehensive webinar what we're launching today and throughout this week, because our first course will be coming out at the end of the day today, and also our hardware is super exciting and we wanted to tell you about that. So our actual release plan, the hardware, like I mentioned before, will be coming out in the first quarter of 2023 as supply permits. So keep your eyes out for that. We are still doing a little bit of testing to make sure that it's up to snuff for you guys and everything is working as planned. So it's coming. The UI and the reports are out now, so you can go to plantiga.io and play around as much as you like. If you have any questions, absolutely send me an email. I think all of you have my contact information from the webinar registration, and I'm happy to hop on a call with you or answer your questions. And the educational content is coming out later today, and we will continue to be putting that out as much as possible. That's something that we're very focused on because we want everybody to use the system to the fullest potential that they can. So that's our release plan. Come to our next webinar, where we're going to go into the specifics of in-clinic workflows and possibilities, some population-specific applications, some opportunities for ROI for in the clinic, where maybe you start charging for testing, because we've had some of our partner clinics do that quite successfully. Yeah, we're happy to take your questions as well. So I believe the registration for that was in the same email that you registered for this webinar. So back to that one to come to that one. And then after that, there will be a third webinar. This is a 3-part series, and we're going to go through some very specific case studies on some ways that Plantiga has helped specific people. And we're going to kind of take a dive into the data on that front. So that's our webinar series plan.
More geeking out.
Yeah. Come get
It's
nerdy
gonna be
with
fun.
us.
Totally.
Yeah. So that's all we've got to present for you guys today. We're happy to open it up to some questions. If anybody has them, just throw them in the chat. Yeah, we'll stop the share and get rolling on that. See if anybody has any right off the bat.
Oh, here we
Okay,
go.
here we go.
Ooh.
All right, I'll read it out. It
Yeah.
looks like it's addressed to you, Matt. So
Okay.
thank you, Paul. Matt mentioned the normative data is giving the red, amber, green color codes. What has gone into the normative calculation, i.e. is it based on gender, age, weight, height, BMI, etc.? If you've gone very granular on those demographics, it will make the normative data more sensitive for interpreting, that's a tough one, interpreting trends at the individual level, i.e. don't want to compare my 22-year-old female runner to my 45-year-old male CrossFitter in terms of norms.
Yeah, no, that's, I mean, that's a great point, Paul. And it's something that we've been, you know, as we've progressed over the past few years, and specifically, I just want to anchor back to, you know, what this actually looked like as we began to implement the technology with real humans. And so as a team, a sports science team, we would be sitting down on Fridays and reviewing data and really trying to understand things with our computer science team as well, who were helping us through some of their algorithms and various techniques to help us sort of understand what was really important in the data. It's become increasingly clear that your question is front and center, a crucial question. We today are providing this as a very general representative sample for asymmetries. So you're absolutely right, especially around performance, that some of the performance data would be highly individual. So if I was a female soccer player, age 18 versus a male triathlete, age 40 versus a basketball player, the performance data would be very, very much specific to those contexts. But around the asymmetries, that's really right now where our normative data is focused. And we've chosen just a wide representation of healthy humans doing you know, the various tasks to contextualize that data. And you can expect that as we move forward and we continue to advance on the computer AI slash algorithms slash different ways to provide intuition and insights on the n=1 level, so the single person over time, that we're only going to expand on that. So again, hopefully that answers the question, but short answer is right now that's a healthy, broad-based demographic for the asymmetries. So we are not currently providing it based on male, female, age for asymmetries, but that stuff will come down the pipeline as we start to develop.
Something else is like we really want to be developing these reports for the people who are using it, and that, like,
Yeah.
you know, something for someone with a movement disorder.
Yeah.
You know, leg swing time variability may mean something very different for someone with Parkinson's disease than it would with someone with, like, you know, osteoarthritis or something like that. So all those are being taken under consideration. And then now that the successful implementation of the reporting has now been released,
yeah,
it's on to the next.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think also combining what Matt just said about the population norms that we have, that gives you like a first level of context, but then it's really important to put it in context with the individual. So like comparing the individual to themselves. So for example, if you have Parkinson's and you compare to our population norms, we don't really expect you to be always in the healthy norms, but that's okay. We know that this is your baseline, and so we can track you and how you're doing relative to your baseline. So combining those two makes it really powerful.
Agreed. And question number 2 here, are there many physiotherapy clinics using Plantiga, and for how long? So probably our longest standing relationship is with a partner here in Vancouver, Nico Berg, who runs a physiotherapy clinic geared a lot around athletes in the Vancouver area. but he's one of several that are in our network, and he's been using Plantiga right from day one. And right from day one, it's taken, like, I guess just a shout out to Nico and others to have the partnerships, to have individuals who are willing to work with us on making the technology better and to work with us through this whole process. We're so appreciative of that. And I just want to say a major thank you to all of you who've been with us along the journey. But Nico's a great example of, he's now released this into his workflow. So he actually brings individuals into the clinic. He's he's able to provide this value and this service to his clientele as a part of the full package of what he's providing in the clinic. So literally, you could go into Nico's clinic, you could get a Plantiga run assessment if you're coming back after an ACL injury, a Plantiga walk assessment if you've got knee OA, Plantiga jump test if you want to know whether or not your horizontal versus vertical jump height asymmetries were normalizing after an injury. And literally, you could walk into Nico's clinic and get this run, and then his staff would help you interpret your progress. So it's really this value proposition to your clientele of, now I can measure my improvements and I can measure the effectiveness of the rehab. And that's probably one of the best examples of how that's being used, but one of several. And it's I think it's only now going to get better with the new reporting function.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think just in terms of numbers, I don't have the exact number, but we've got between 15 and 20 clinics using our system in their regular workflow.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so thanks, Caroline. We've got another question here. Could you talk a bit more about jump and run strategies? Yes, we absolutely can. I think, Megan, you can kick it off and I'll jump in if I have anything to add.
Yeah, this was that, like, when we're creating these reports, it's like great numbers, cool, comparative to norms. So like, what did they mean? And we wanted to have in one single page, the most like dense amount of information, very simple and clear without having to really dive into the meanings behind it. So the jump strategy, it is, I always go back to like explaining to people why they move the way they do. And that's why we were really wanting to emphasize that like everyone can have a different strategy. It's important to see how that strategy changes over time. But for me, like my background was a competitive powerlifter competing internationally. So I'm not a springy person. I can't say that I've ever in my life did consecutive jumping until later on in my life. So I'm a pusher for sure. And so you got Lauren here, who is, varsity volleyball, like springy. And I look at her jump and I'm like, wow, like, that's impressive. I can barely make it a couple inches off the ground. But, it is just showing that we have these different strengths and we have these different weaknesses. It's not saying that one person is bad. It's not saying that the other is better, but we use different strategies to elevate our center of masses, is like basically achieve the goal of the task. And that is just jumping up. So.
And just like one of the ways we're pulling that data out is Plantiga is able to accurately measure when the foot is on and off the ground. And so part of it is being able to look at these, flight times and ground contact times and understanding those ratios. And that's how these are actually practically calculated. And one of the things that we'll do certainly, and it'll be in the education side of things on the resources, but it'll also be in future webinars, is maybe we'll do a bit of a deeper dive into what that stuff looks like, and we can talk about how it's calculated and then how we're using the information. Let's see here. So again, just another question just around population norms, and I just want to just again reiterate just quickly to say that we've got partnerships right now with third-party institutions where these data are being sort of compiled, and it's a sort of how we're going about this. So right now we've got some normative data on a healthy population, more than 150 of them.
Yeah, I believe 188 healthy runners from age, I want to say 16 to 70. Yeah. So it's specifically healthy people because we wanted to make sure that data was really clean. Yeah. And every single data set that we collected, we oversaw, and we actually collected all of that data ourselves to make sure that it was consistent and clean data so that we could feed good data into our algorithms. Yeah.
And we realized, like, again, Lauren brought up this case where let's say you were working with an individual who had an amputation. Obviously, the asymmetry data would not be specific to them, right? I mean, because of the nature of the injury and their situation. But by the idea that we're looking at left and right asymmetries, and we covered this on, now approaching 200 individuals, healthy, and this database is growing all the time, and we've got a broad range. I think it provides, from the standpoint of left versus right asymmetries and running and walking and jumping, it provides a pretty good picture of what humans typically look like. But as with everything, we just look to improve this, and that's one of our goals in the next couple of years, is to further refine how we make norms and provide that information back to our users.
Yeah, totally. Okay, let's see. Next question. What does a normal clinic workflow look like? So depends a little bit on the clinic and what kind of resources they have available, but we can use Nico's clinic, Lynn Valley, as an example. So they actually have a couple of different structures. So that's why I picked them, because there are different ways that you can implement Plantiga in the clinic. We'll just give you a general one, because we'll kind of go into that in the next webinar next week. But for him, a client will come in a little bit early for their appointment. They'll do the Plantiga tests with a kinesiologist that Lynn Valley has just kind of ready to do those tests. The data will be uploaded while that individual is actually in their appointment, and then Nico will go through that data at the end of the appointment, because it takes about a quarter of the time of the activity to upload and process the data. And so by the time he's done his treatment of the person, he can go through the data with them, have it on the screen, or print out the report. He's been using their reports a lot, and there's been really good feedback from them as well.
Yeah.
And then, so they'll keep coming back for regular testing, which is a really critical part of his workflow. And he uses it a lot for tracking progress. And even regression is really important, because if you have somebody who's coming in and their strength is not improving, or it's actually getting worse, sometimes they don't really believe you when you say it. But if you show them a graph and you say, hey, this has dropped, like we need to focus on this, it helps with the intrinsic motivation, and it keeps them coming back to the clinic, which is really critical, and make sure that they're going in the right direction all the time. So that's one of his workflows. He also has recently started charging for baseline testing and concussion testing. So people will come into the clinic specifically to get Plantiga tests, and they will get a report and an analysis based off of the results.
Another example I think that is really compelling for anybody working in private practice is, like, obviously in a perfect world, what do you wish you could do? It would be that if you're working with, let's say, young soccer players, that you could somehow intervene before they get hurt. Give them something to do that would hopefully reduce their chances of getting hurt. And let's just leave that aside, like to help them perform better. On the field of play, they're running faster, they're jumping equally on both legs, they're able to do the things that they need to do. And then should they get hurt, you have a sort of a benchmark to compare against, where they come back to your clinic, and now you're really part of not like a transactional, like come in for an appointment and see you later, and you're trying to convince them how to, to sort of stay on this journey. But now you've got this transformational relationship with your client, where you've got this picture of how they looked before, and now you're going to be with them on this journey back to health and back to sport and back to performance. And to me, that's a much more 2022 transformational, client-focused way to work in the whole space of providing sport medicine care. And so to that end, I also know that there are users of Plantiga that are doing exactly that. Like, you're taking this out to the field, you're testing, groups of soccer players, teams, right? Embedding inside organization, running baselines, being able to provide that information back to the coaches and to their strength coaches, because it's easy to share this stuff now. And really, it's like your own internal referral process, whereby as people, inevitably things do happen, you've now got this way to provide a really high level of individual care and support as somebody's making their way back from injuries and getting back to the things they love to do. So I think that's another example where this is a pretty compelling application of the technology.
I love hearing the stories where it's like how the patients and they're getting so engaged, and it's almost at the point of like gamification. Like,
Yeah.
you're like, well, see that I'm going to beat my score than last time, and it's really like getting that behavior change and promoting that, like, the right movement, and obviously building that relationship with them to get them to come back.
Yeah. Just a quick time check. We're coming up on 55 minutes, so we did want to cap this at an hour, but we do have two final questions. I think we can answer them pretty quickly. Question number one is, are there reports for every activity? And the answer is yes. You can get that report, which obviously is important. And then the final question there is, how would remote monitoring work? And I'll just quickly kick this off, and then I'll throw to Megan and Lauren. But again, this idea of being in the space that we're in, what's so exciting about it is no one's ever done it. So to the best of my knowledge, the idea of how we built our technology and how we built out Plantiga, it's a brand new blue ocean space. This is not a part of people's workflows. We don't really understand how this works, the best possible way 5 years ago or 6 years ago when we're venturing down this path of making a new technology. But what the really cool thing about it is when you surround yourself with great people and you actually listen to what clients have to say, you start to realize where the gaps are and where the opportunities are. And certainly one of the things that we realized in the past couple of years was putting the power in the hands of the individual. So, how do I take this technology home and test anywhere in the world? How do I test, if I'm recovering from injury and my physical therapist wants to monitor me as I'm coming back from my injury, and they're using this as a tool to help guide, hey, when do you need to come in for an appointment next? You need to have a way that people can actually do this themselves. And so that was the whole point behind remote patient monitoring is we've got an app now that you pull this thing up. It's easy to use. We've got instructions on how to use this new system that are going to be very, very detailed, which would mean that any person could do this. So literally you could run your own walk, run, or jump test anywhere at any point in time with the simple click of a button on your smartphone, which means you don't need to have an expert technician running a computer and doing all sorts of really technical stuff. We've built it so that remote patient monitoring is something that can get done really easily by the end user. And so then with that, I guess the question is like, how would you implement? There's a million ways to implement that, right? Whether you're a NFL strength and conditioning coach and your players are going home for the summer and you want to be able to monitor them while they're home, whether you're working in the context of care in the community, right? Being able to give this to your patients and clients so that they can test themselves wherever they are. Working with special forces populations out in the real world where they're doing all sorts of, crazy combat missions and whatnot. There's a lot of possibilities for remote patient monitoring. So I don't know if you guys have anything else to add about it. I'm really excited about it, as you can tell.
But injuries happen in the real world, and we move very differently in the real world versus what we do in the clinic. And it's not to say that the clinic doesn't provide value, because it does, especially when you're comparing how you behave under perfect conditions compared to, a cluttered house and so many obstacles when you have like a neurodegenerative type population. And then I think of with the clinic, and probably everyone listening here, you are some form of movement expert and you have some form of expertise in it. And as movement experts, we understand movement quality and we can see it and we can look at the technique. But with remote monitoring, it allows us, opens us up to measure other aspects of, ability to move freely and easily, or performance like capacity. How do I look throughout the duration of my walk? If I look okay in the clinic, but I'm always coming back in, with my knee pain, okay, what is actually happening during those walks that's causing it? And what are those compensations that can identify some trainable deficits? And that's really a big gap that Plantiga really solves for people. And then there's also, skill, so if I can do some sort of task in one environment, can I do it in all of them, which is really important for everyday life and even sports. So that is where I really kind of see that power of remote monitoring, and even readiness. We know how important programming is. There are applications in knowing how effective my training program is. Am I recovering enough? Using something like jump testing every week to be how my jump performance is changing, to show whether you're recovering enough or you're peaking well for whatever type of competition you're doing. So it's so many different applications.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're up on the hour, so thanks very much, everybody. Really appreciate you joining us. This will be recorded, and obviously we'll share it widely. And make sure you join us for our next couple webinars, because that's where we're going to dive into some knowledge translation for you guys in terms of how to use the system.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. Hopefully see you all next week. Bye.